Yep.
All right, so here we're holding on Vav Amid Beis, 6b. Okay, and we continue on the Gemara. So, ready? Here we go. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rav, Haboidik, one who searches for chametz, right? You search for chametz on the night of the 14th. Sarich sheyibatel. You still have to nullify. Whereas Rashi says, Haboidik tzarich sheyibatel, the one who searches then needs to nullify, beliboy, in his heart. Samach lebedika miyad, right after he does the search for the chametz. V'aymer, and he says, Kol chamira v'chamira de'ikar b'shusi, any leavened bread that is in my house. De'ikar hadein lebatel needs to be mevatel. So Frank the Gemara asked the question, Jeff, you still there? Because you're frozen. No, you good?
Okay, yeah, you were frozen for a while, but you're clear now.
No, clear for that, so I'll start again. You ready? Here we go again.
Okay.
Okay, I think we have, I think we got everything. Okay, here we go. Ready? Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, Haboidik tzarich sheyibatel. When you do bedikas chametz on the night of the 14th, okay, you then right afterwards have to do the nullification ceremony. As Rashi explains, Haboidik tzarich sheyibatel, one who searches has to nullify beliboy, in his heart. Samoch lebedika miyad, right after he does the search. V'aymer, and he says the words that we use. Kol chamira de'ikar b'beisel hadein levatle. All the leavened bread that is found in my house needs to be nullified. Now, of course, the question is, Rashi first says he nullifies it belibo, in his heart. And then he says the words, you have to say the words, kol chamira. And the answer is that the words, of course, are merely defining what's taking place in your heart. If you say the words, but your heart and your brain are not activated, right? The words are only merely words. It has to be a true nullification takes place in your heart. Now the Gemara asks the question, my time, why? The truth of the matter is, we learned before that everybody's trusted to do the bedika. Everybody's trusted to do a search. And we said, if you do a search, there is a chazaka, an assumption that the house no longer has chametz. So if we have a good assumption that the house no longer has chametz, why do I have to take the extra step of nullifying? And for the Gemara, if you want to say mishum pirurin, if you want to say because of crumbs, listen, you're eating. It's inevitable that you're going to miss some crumbs when you're searching for chametz. I can remember one time that when my kids were little, we were searching for chametz, and then afterwards, for some reason, I bent down under the steam in the kitchen, and I found out lined up in a straight line a whole bunch of Cheerios. You can imagine. So this is what they call it. So therefore, it's inevitable, as the Gemara calls it, pirurin. Good morning. We're holding. Good morning, everybody. We're holding Davav Amid Beis. And so, once again, the Gemara is saying that right after we do the bedika, you have to be mevatel, you have to nullify. And the Gemara then asks the question, my tama, why is that? Why is that? Meaning that once we do a search, there is a chazaka, an assumption that the house no longer has chametz. So the Gemara explains, maybe you could say because we're worried about the crumbs. Zok the Gemara, haloi chashivi. This has no value. Since it has no value, it's already essentially ownerless. So that can't be the problem. The chiten, you can say, since it's in your house. And when you close the house, you lock your house in order to protect everything that's in the house. So therefore, the crumbs, even though by themselves have no value, but since they're being watched together with all the other values, it may be something that we need to worry about. Good morning, Charlie. I can see you. How you doing?
Good. How are you? You said Vav Amid Beis?
Yes, Vav Amid Beis, because that's when we left off on Friday. We got to take. We didn't learn Shabbos. That's why. V'atanya. That's why we're learning a little quicker today. V'atanya. We'll catch up. V'atanya. Soifei te'enim the unripe figs that are left on the tree at the end of the harvest. That's important. But the field itself is watched because of the grapes that have not yet been completely harvested, or Saifei Anovim, or the unripe grapes. But the field is watched because of the squash, or because of the gourds that are still growing in the field. So now the Gemara says something very important. Bisman Shabalabayis Makbid Alein. If the owner of the field still is very particular about the remaining unripe figs or the unripe grapes, Asurin Mishum Gezel, then a poor person cannot come into the field and simply take the unripe stuff, because then that would be considered stealing. But on the flip side, for the owner, he would be mechayiv, he would be responsible to tithe, because he gave it a value, because he was makbid on it, he was particular on it, therefore it's still his. But this man she'ein balabayis makbid aleihem. But if the balabayis, the owner, is not makbid, he's not particular, mitar mishum gezel, the poor people can simply walk in and take it, because the owner is essentially saying it's ownerless, otherwise known as hefker, ownerless, upiturim mishum maisa, and therefore becomes potter from tithing because it's not his. So what do you see? That even when the field is watched because of other things that do have value, if in your mind you say these things have no value, then anybody can walk in and take them, and they're potter from maisa. Same thing over here by b'dikas chametz, right? We want to say the whole reason for the nullification process, the batola, to be mevatel the chametz, was for the perurin, for the crumbs, right? Because we said, but the crumbs have no value. The Gemara then said, but maybe they don't have value. But the fact that they're in the house and the house is watched when you lock the door of the house, so therefore, agav, the things that they watch, they also have a chashiv. You see from here that that's not the case. So again, we have no reason at the moment. Why is it that after we do a search, and like we learned before, when you do a search, a chazaka, an assumption is created that there is no more chametz. So why do I then have to go ahead and do a nullification, a kol chamira v'chamira, and be mavatal b'leiv and be mavatal in the heart? Amarabo gezerah shema yemotze geluska yofe. We're afraid that after the fact, you're going to find a yummy donut. You're going to find a yummy roll. Vidata alayu, and your mind is going to be on it. So look at the Rashi right next to this. Vidata alay literally lines up right next to it. Chashuvuhu be'einav. It's going to be chashuv in his eyes. So let's say it's one of the new sufganiyot that Lax and Bagel is working on, right? And it's going to be there. It's something that you want. Chashuvuhu be'einav. And it's going to bother him to burn this chametz. And so that in your heart, you're not going to give up ownership for even 1 second. That 1 second will cause a problem. And therefore he'll be over on the prohibition that you shall not see and you shall not find. But if you nullify over Deloy Kosa, because all you have to deposit only asks from you, Elo Tashvisu, disposal. But from this Rashi, you see something unbelievably that Simeon pointed out last week, that Bal Yeroy, Bal Yemotzeh start in the afternoon of the 14th. That's what Rashi say. Remember, this is all taking place on Erev Pesach. Bepashtus. And the Mefarshim point out, according to Rashi, it seems that when the Isurim start in the afternoon at the time of the Karban Pesach, so much so that even the Isur of Bal Yeroy, Bal Yemotzeh, you shall not see and you shall not find, start even then. So Zakti Gemara, V'chi Mishkachas. So why do I have to do it right after B'dika at the night of the 14th? Mishkachas lo, let's go ahead and just be Mavatal it. Let's go be Mavatal it when I find it. Maybe I will find it after the hour that everything becomes prohibited, which is to say, at the 6th hour midrabanan and closer to the 7th hour midoraisa, v'la b'rishus kaima, and therefore essentially it will not be in the Baal Abba's rishus automatically. V'loy motzi mevatel, and therefore if it's not in his possession, he can't be mevatel it. The Omer Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Elazar says, Shnei devarim eina b'rishus shel adam. Two things are not considered in the property of a person. And the pasuk makes it as if it is in his rishus. Rashi l'chayiv aleim, to make him chayiv on it. Ve'eluhein bar b'shus harabim, a ditch in the public thoroughfare. V'chometz mishei shalos l'mala. Two parts. The bar b'shus harabim, the rishus harabim, the public thoroughfare, belongs to everybody, which is another way of saying that it belongs to nobody. Essentially, it's a non-profit, similar to a shul. The shul belongs to all the members, which is to say it doesn't belong to any one individual. Okay, there is no K1 in our parlance on a 990. Right? So therefore, if somebody goes ahead and digs a ditch in the public thoroughfare, right? Let's say he goes ahead and he builds a ditch in the public thoroughfare. The guy's coming from New York and he can't believe that there are no potholes in Boca Raton, so he builds a pothole in the middle of power line. We would say, so what? It's in the public thoroughfare. He doesn't have to worry about it. The Torah comes and says, if you dig a ditch, even if it's in the public thoroughfare, which means you don't really own it, you're still responsible to take care of the ditch. And the second thing is, v'chometz m'shei shoyes l'mala, and chometz from the 6th hour and on. The 6th hour and on, that the chometz m'shei shoyes l'mala, because once it's from that point on, since it's osam b'hanod, you cannot have any benefit from it. You can't have any benefit from it. By definition, something you cannot have benefit, you no longer have ownership in it. You no longer have ownership in it. We're done. Right? It's as if it doesn't belong to you. If it doesn't belong to you, then you can't nullify something that doesn't belong to you. So it says the Gemara, so go ahead and nullify it in the 4th or nullify it in the 5th hour. Why do you have to wait? Why do you have to do it the night before? The Gemara answers human nature. The Chiva the Balav Zaman Suruhu, since it's not the hour of the Isser only starts, the prohibition starts from the 6th hour and onwards. Balav Zaman Be'ira, and it's not the time of disposal. Dilma Pasha B'Loi Mevatale. There's a good chance he's going to forget because you get busy, you forget. Nothing is pressing you to remind you, oops, I got to nullify. But the night before, when you're doing the bedika, right, obviously during the search, you're obviously being involved in a Passover thing of getting rid of the chametz. Therefore, that's the time we say, let's do the nullification. Top of Daf Zayin Amid Aleph. So it's straight to go over Nitbal B'Shish. Okay, so go ahead and be mevatel it, nullified on the 6th hour, because that's the hour when you're busy burning the chametz. Since at the beginning of the 6th hour, the prohibition starts rabbinically, it is compared comparatively as if it is a biblical prohibition. And if it's a biblical prohibition, and therefore you can no longer have benefit from it, it's no longer in your rishus, because essentially what's happening is when the Rabbanan, when the rabbinics got up and said it starts on the 6th hour, they said essentially your chametz is now hefker. Hefker, bezdin hefker. Ownerless, the court makes it ownerless. Hefker, bezdin hefker. So on the 6th hour, when the rabbinical prohibition goes into effect, even though it's not a biblical prohibition, we say it's like a biblical prohibition, and the Rabbanan have the power essentially to make what you have ownerless. They make it to have ownerless, Therefore, it's not in your rishus, it's not in your property, which means therefore you can't nullify something that doesn't belong to you. So Zok the Gemara, Veloy Motzi Mevatel, to answer the Gemara, Veloy Motzi Levatel, and therefore, since it's not in your rishus, you won't be able to nullify it at that time. The Amar of Gidul Amarav, Chayed Rechia Bar Yosef Amarav, very interesting. Hamekadesh V'Shei Shoyis Lamalo. If somebody marries a woman, remember marriage works in two steps: kedushin, erisin, and kedushin. Kedushin is erisin, meaning when he betroths a woman. Hamekadesh B'Shei Shoyis Umalo. When he's mekadesh a woman, he marries a woman from the 6th hour onwards, and he gives her in consideration chametz. Instead of her ring, she gets chametz. Okay, as long as it's worth the pruta, as long as it has some value, he can be mekadesh with this. And even with wheat, that's Rashi says is hard and doesn't really rise and become chametz. It doesn't matter. And choishin l'kedushin, it's not a kedushin, because chametz as of the 6th hour, something that is chametz as of the 6th hour, rabbinically is prohibited. If it's prohibited, it therefore you're not allowed to have benefit, and if you're not allowed to have benefit, it doesn't belong to you anymore, and therefore you can't nullify. Same thing over here. If it doesn't belong to you, you can't give it to the lady to get married to her because you just gave her something that doesn't belong to you. What's remarkable here is the power that we're talking about here. Because biblically speaking, the prohibitions don't go into effect until late in the 6th hour, when the Korban Pesach was first brought, when the Pesach sacrifice was first brought. That means that Minat Torah, at the beginning of the 6th hour, you were still allowed to go ahead and deal and have benefit from chametz, which means that the marriage on a biblical level just went through, which would then make the woman an Ashes Ish, a woman of a man, and mean that she's not allowed to be with any other man in the world. Comes the Rabbanan and says, doesn't matter. Even if biblically it's a marriage, we're saying it's not a marriage, because we put in the rabbinical prohibition as of now, and that's as of now, you can't have any more benefit from the chametz, and therefore you gave her nothing, and it's not a marriage. Rashi gives the famous words, the mekadesh, every time we do a marriage, adata de rabbanan mekadesh, on the power, by the authority of the rabbanan, we are mekadesh. And the hefka bezdin hefka. And if bezdin wants to make something ownerless, they have the power to go ahead and say it's ownerless. And if you remember how we get married underneath the chuppah, we say the following words. I hereby betroth you with this ring, Kedas Moshe v'Yisrael, with the authority of Moses and Israel. We're saying very clearly, we state very clearly that the whole marriage ceremony is being done under the auspices of the rabbinic authority. So much so that even in a case where midi arises biblically, the marriage would still have taken place because the chametz is not osir at the beginning of the 6th hour biblically, but rabbinically the rabbis already made it osir. That's it, no more. That's how powerful authority that was put into our rabbis. Give me a second. I got to go find the place again. Here we go. So the Gemara goes further. Good morning, Isaac. How are you? Okay. Ulabasa Isura and Loy Boyim Mivatale. So we've been saying the whole time here that once it becomes Osir Bahana, once it becomes prohibited from any benefit, right, that you cannot nullify it. Right, the Gemara about Tanya, if somebody was sitting in the base medrash, in the study hall, the Niskan remembers Sheyesh Chametz B'Sayich Beisai, and he remembers this Chametz in his house, Mevatel B'Liboy. He could go ahead and in his heart say, Kol Chamira Mi Mevatel Echad Shabbos v'Echad Yom Tov. Sai on Shabbos and Sai was Yom Tov. So the Gemara says, Bishlem Shabbos, if he's sitting in shul in the study hall on Shabbos, Mishkach is like a going Shechalaba also Liyos b'Shabbos. It could be that Erev Pesach fell out on Shabbos. He's in shul, he's learning, okay, and he remembers that there's chametz at home, so it's Erev Pesach, so he's about to believe, but before, it was in the morning, it was before the Itzaman Issa, before the time of the prohibition. Ela Yontiv, but on Yontiv, Basi Yisuru, on Yontiv, obviously it's after the time of the prohibition began. So how could this Baraisa then go say to us that if he remembers he has chametz, but Bata Beliba, even on Yontiv, how can you nullify? It doesn't matter. It's already, the Issa already happened. We just finished saying if the prohibition exists, it means you can no longer have benefit. If you can no longer have benefit, it essentially means Hefka Bezdin Hefka, that Bezdin went ahead and made it ownerless, and it doesn't belong to you, which means you no longer have the power to nullify. So we're talking about a student who's sitting in front of his rabbi. Viniska, and he remembers, there is a braided dough in his house. In other words, he was thinking about making a challah, and so he braided the challah, and it was sitting there, but it hadn't risen yet, so it wasn't yet chametz. Okay, umisayrish shematachmitz koidem umivatale mikimit and there's chametz. So he remembers in the middle of his learning of learning in front of his rebbe, and he says, "Oh my gosh, if I leave it there, we're in Florida. It's been raining like crazy for the last 7 months. The humidity has gone nuts. So the dough might rise and become chametz. So there, before it became chametz, he nullifies it. So even if it's after the zaman of the prohibition has already started, since we're talking about something that actually didn't become chametz yet, it's still in your possession because you can still have benefit from it because it's not chametz." Right over there, he can go ahead and be Mavata Belev even on Yom Tov. In other words, he did it on Yom Tov. He was going to make a flat bread like the Svardim do. The Svardim, let's say, have the flat breads even on Pesach, right? And it didn't rise, and he was afraid it was going to rise, so therefore he was Mavata. Dekanami, a proof this is what we're talking about. That the whole problem was that he was a student in front of his rabbi, and he could not embarrass his rabbi by getting up while his rabbi was talking. This is a terrible lesson for the rest of us. That even when it comes to chametz, you can't, it's possible chametz, you're not allowed to get up in the middle of when the rabbi is giving his speech. So, but the Baraisa is simply telling us, as Rashi explains, that means if he had not been in the Beis Medrash, he would have been able to go home and deal with it. It's the fact that he was in the Beis Medrash and listening to his rabbi, that was the only reason why it is Shema Minah, and therefore this is a good proof. So we end up the Gemara that you have the reason why we have to be mevatalit on the night of the 14th is because if we wait, we may run into a point where it's no longer essentially in your possession, which means you can no longer nullify, and we do it at night because since you're doing bedika, your mind is on it. You won't forget at that moment, and you'll do brother. If we wait till the morning and you're not busy with Pesach stuff, you're likely to forget because that's human nature. Amar Rabba. Something Gemara Vaita. Amar Rabba Bar Huna. Amar Rav. Hapas she'ifsa. If this was a case of a guy had a box, what we would call today a matzah tash, a box that he was putting his matzahs in, but it was used, it was used all year long. Okay, it was used all year long. And he finds in there a piece of something that's completely and utterly moldy. So he can't see whether it's matzah or whether, which means he can feed it to his dog, or it's chametz and he can't feed it to the dog. Chiv and shirov matzah muteres. Since most of the year you use the box for matzah, it's mutter. It's okay, you can assume because we halach acha haroiv. We go after the majority. What's the majority here? The majority is that the box is used for matzah. No problem. Hey chidami. He said, what's the case? If if he knew that this piece is really a piece of bread, it's just a moldy piece of bread. Ki rav matzah my hava. Even if normally the majority of time matzah is in this box, who cares? If you know for a fact that it is a piece of chametz, the assumption of the majority doesn't offset the actual fact that, of course, you're a piece of chametz and you can't use it. It means, therefore, he didn't know if it's chametz and he didn't know if it's matzah. My area did keep Rav Samatzah in that case. If we don't know which way it is, chametz or matzah, it's so moldy we have no clue. Then why do I care that the majority of the time matzah is in this box? Even if the majority of the time matzah was not in this box, I used it even for chametz. I even used it for challah at least 50% of the time. Nami gazel basa basa. We should go after the rule of LIFO. Last in, first out. In other words, you say, why are we hanging ourselves here? On the majority, on the concept of majority, we have another concept of halcha basa basra. We go after the last thing that's going out, the last circumstance. What's the last circumstance? The box is clearly being used for matzah. The odds are this is a piece of matzah. That's what we should rely on what's known as the umdina de milsa, the assumption of the facts that are on the ground now, which is that the last thing in the box is matzah. We can rely on that. We don't need to come on to the majority. Even without the majority, right now we can rely on what's going on here in the last circumstance. Didn't we learn this is a case of somebody that had a money box? This is a case of money that is found on the street in Jerusalem. So there are different rules. Now, this was a situation. There is regular money known as chulin money, which is non-sacred money, which could be used for any kind of purchase. And then there's Maisa Sheni money. What is Maisa Sheni money? One of the tights that one has to do when he has his produce is Maisa Sheni, which is that he has to take a certain portion of the produce and bring it up to Yerushalayim, to Jerusalem, and eat it within the walls of Jerusalem to give power to the city of Jerusalem. What you're allowed to do instead of carrying all your produce is you're allowed to be paid to redeem your produce onto money. So you say the produce is worth $100. You take $100 out of your pocket and you say this $100 is instead of the produce. Now that $100 needs to be spent in Yerushalayim. Okay, now most of the time that meant, but that money had to be used, that Maisa Sheni money had to be used in Yerushalayim. So therefore, most of the time, Maisa Sheni money was used for holy things in Yerushalayim. Specifically, when a person got to Yerushalayim, it's when he took care of all his carbon chatases and all his carbon shalomims, all his thank you carbons, and all the carbons that he had to bring for all the averis that he did inadvertently throughout the year. So they would come up most of the time 3 times a year. The Shalosh Regalim, which is Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. 3 times a year you should see as Pnei Hashem, the face of Hashem, as it were, on the base of Mikdash. So they would come up with this money. And this money, more often than not, was used logically to purchase the stuff that they needed to get in Yerushalayim, which was normally the stuff, the kabbanas, the sacrifices that they needed to bring. So the Gemara says, money that's found in Jerusalem, right in front of the animal salesman, the car salesman, but in those days it wasn't the car salesman. What was it? It was the animal salesman, which were a big deal in Yerushalayim because obviously people needed to bring kabbanas, sacrifices. So there were pens over there. There were pens over there to sell behemoths. So money that is found loose right in front of the brokers, the animal brokers, li'oila meiser, we will go on the assumption that it is meiser. Bahar Abayis, but on the mountain of the Beis Hamikdash, chulin. the money is considered chulin. Tosfos asked the question, but the halacha is you're not allowed to bring money onto the harabayis. So how could they ever have money on the harabayis? V'oimeri, the second Tosfos on top. V'oimeri, the einay aser. The truth is, it doesn't mean that money is aser on the harabayis. Ela heicha de nisa b'fahesir. It's only if somebody's showing out his money publicly. The genaihu. Because then it's an embarrassment. Because it looks like you're going onto the Harabais to do business, not spend your time with the Rebbeinu Shalom. But if you do it privately, in other words, you have a pocket and you have it near a wallet in your pocket, it's okay. So in this case, we're worried about some of the money that he had in his pocket fell out. We say on the Harabais itself, it's chulin because Roiv of the year, it's not the Shalosh Regalim. It's not the 3 times of the year that you have to come up. It's not the 3 great festivals of our people. And therefore it's the odds are it's regular money from a regular people who live in Yerushalayim that have come up onto the Harabais. But in front of the brokers of animals, since most of the time those were used for sacrifices, and by definition, usually that's where the Ma'aser Sheni money went. We say that we assume always that that's holy money, that was Ma'aser Sheni money. Be Yerushalayim, now in the whole city of Jerusalem, B'shas HaRegel, at the time of the Shalosh Regalim, of the time of the holidays, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, Ma'aser, money found in the street. We say the street people are full from everywhere. The place is packed. The money found in the middle of the street is Ma'aser Sheni. B'shaya Ma'aser Shana Chulin. But the rest of the year, it's considered Chulin, non-sacred money, and you can use it for anything. V'amar Rav Shemaya bar Zera, my tamo than in Yerushalayim stam. It's considered Ma'aser or not. Hoyu v'shuke Yerushalayim asurim lischabe b'chol yoyim. Because they used to, at the end of the day, sweep Yerushalayim to make sure that it's clean every single day. So therefore, the money found during the regel, even though most of the year, the roiv, the majority of the year, obviously it's not the time of the regel, and therefore the money should be considered non-sacred. But because every day they swept the field, they swept the city, so that the money that you found today, the money you found today is from today. Alma Amris, therefore you see, Kaimi Ozlile, Vitani Achrinin, we say what came first, and what's last is last. In other words, the Gemara is saying over here that the money found on the ground has to be from today. The majority, the roiv of the year, it would be chulin, non-sacred, but we don't go after the majority. When we basra, when we go by the last thing that's going on, and that's over here. That every day in Jerusalem, the streets are clean. So today's money is the last money that was here on the floor. Today's money, since it's the regel, by the holidays, we make an assumption that it's likely to be Ma'aser money, right, which has to be used differently, cannot be used for just simple purchases. So Zakti Gemara, Hachinami, by the bread, by the thing that was so moldy, Yomi Nema Kama Ozel, V'ha'adinuhu. And now it's Pesach. The box is only being used for matzah. That's the last thing. Let's make an assumption that this moldy thing is matzah, and we should be able to use it. Something Gemara Shani Hachada Fishu Mochiach Alayu, that the amount of moldiness is going to testify for it, which means it's going to demonstrate. Listen, this didn't just get moldy overnight. This took time to get moldy, which means it probably got moldy before Pesach, which means now it's chametz. So says the Gemara, then what was this whole discussion? That even if the majority of the year it's matzah, if I have an assumption that it's came from before Passover, I need to worry that it's chametz. So the Gemara says, you're right. Forget this. We're translating this all wrong. Amar Rabba, loy temer sherav samatzah. Don't say that Rav means that most of the year, the majority of the years, the box is being used for matzah. Ela ema sherabu yemei matzah aleu. That the days of matzah are many. What do we mean by this? That it's already the 5th or 6th day of Pesach. You've had hot matzah sitting on this box, so therefore the molding process has sped up due to the heat that was in the box. That's obvious, right? It says because it was so spoiled. Mao, the same I might have thought. Since it's so spoiled, Igla Milsa Devade Chametz Mayu. The facts demonstrate that this is chametz because such spoilage must have come not just from the last week, it had to have come from before, 2-3 weeks before, and therefore I got to worry about chametz. Kamash Malon Rav came to tell me, Chiv and Shirabu Yemei Matzah Alayu, since many days of Pesach have come. And you've been putting in Ba'amina, Kol Yami V'Yami, Nahama Chamimo. That I've been putting in each day hot matzahs right out of the oven and threw it onto this piece, and therefore it speedily, quickly spoiled. So therefore you're allowed to say that no, this piece has only been there for a few days, but the great spoilage came about because of the heat of the matzahs. So Zabti Gemara, Miyazlina Basa Basa. So what now we're saying, essentially we go after the last circumstance. We're not so hung up on the majority. We're hung up on where is it standing here at the end. But Tanya, we learned just the opposite. Rabbi Yosef ben Yehuda, Teva, a box. This is what I was saying before. Teva, a box, a money box. A box that was used for non-sacred money and for Maisa Sheni money. You saved it over there on two sides of the box. In Roiv Chulin Chulin, if the majority of the year it was used for non-sacred money, we could assume that it's non-sacred, this money that we don't know what it is. In Roiv Maisa Maisa, if most of the year you used it for sacred money, then we have to assume that the money that you now found in there is sacred. But why are we going in and hinging it on the majority of the year? Let's follow the last circumstance. What money have you used this wallet, this box, in the last week or two? Where the box was used for both. I don't know. It could be that you piled things up. You put one pile in one corner, one pile in the other corner, and the piles fell. And now I'm mixed up. No, I found it in a hole, in a crack in the box. So I have no idea how long it's been in there. Since I have no idea how it's long in there, I've got to go and take the non-lenient position. So now the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, somebody who searches has to make a blessing. We have a rule, and the Gemara here is going to discuss it. Kol brachis mevarich aleim oivel asiyasim. All brachis you make prior to the doing of the mitzvah. So for an example, tefillin, you put it on your arm, you start tightening it, but you don't tighten it completely. You first make the bracha to put on tefillin, and then you tighten the tefillin, because you make the blessing before you actually do the commandment. So the question is, mein mevarach, what do you bless when you search for the chametz? Rapapi Amar Mishmei Derava, you say levar chametz, to dispose of chametz, because that means I'm going to dispose chametz. I'm making the blessing now on what I'm about to do. Rapapa Amar Mishmei Derava al bir chametz, regarding this disposal of chametz, which is not as clear a language. In other words, so the Gemara says, levar kulam aloy pligi, the first thing to dispose of chametz, everybody agrees, the vadila ba mashma, it connotates the future. In other words, since I have to make the bracha before, over lasi asam, before I do the bracha, before I do the mitzvah, so I'm to dispose of chametz, levar chametz, this is what I'm going to do. So therefore, that everybody agrees. And top of Amud Beis, 7 Amud Beis, Ki Pligi, they argue, Balbir. They're only arguing with regard to the terms regarding disposed. Mar Savar, Me'ikra Mashva. The first rabbi says no good. That means that regarding the disposal means what took place. I can't make a blessing on what took place. Umar Savala Ba Mashma. The Mar Savar says no, it means even the future. Regarding the process can be either going back or going to the future. Meisvei, the Gemara phrase, by the milah, by the circumcision, we say Baruch Hashem Kedushanim b'mitzvahs v'tzivanu al hamilah, regarding the milah. But according to you, the first man, the Oma al hamilah means on what took place, and that's not good because the milah is going to take place. First we make the bracha and then we do the circumcision. So, and for the Gemara, no. Hasam heichi nema. What is he going to say? Nema namul. He should say Hashem Kedushanim b'mitzvahs v'tzivanu lemol. Lemol, to circumcise. It's not the father who's the one that's commanded to do the circumcision that's actually doing the circumcision. Who usually does it? The Mayil does it, who's only a shliach, a messenger of the person. A messenger of a person is like the person himself, is like the person himself, but isn't the person himself. There is a little limitation to it. So therefore, what is he supposed to say? Therefore, so then Avi Ben Ma'iklamema. But if the father of the son is also the Moil, he's the one that's going to circumcise his own son, he should say Limo to circumcise. You're right. If he himself does it, he should do it. The Gemara asks, al hashchita, regarding shchita. Right? When we want to eat meat, we have to shecht, we have to slaughter the animal first in a kosher way in order for us to eat kosher meat. So according to this, we're making we're saying regarding the shechita, we should say lishchait, to sacrifice. Should he say to slaughter? It's not he that has to slaughter the animal, because in fact, slaughtering is not the mitzvah. It's not the commandment. The commandment is that if I want to eat meat, I need to eat meat that was slaughtered. But the slaughtering itself is nothing only until after somebody eats the meat. If somebody, for an example, comes along and slaughters an animal and nobody eats the animal, it's no different than if a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it, doesn't make a sound. What was accomplished by the slaughtering? What's supposed to be accomplished is that we eat geshacht in the flesh. We eat slaughtered meat. So therefore, the blessing is the one who does the actual shechita, does the actual, slaughtering, in himself is not really doing a mitzvah. So it's right to Gemara, Pesach v'kodshim ma'iklamim. Pesach, which is a chiyuv, the carbon basic, and other kodshim and other holy things. The Gemara says, Ein hachanami. You really should say lishchait. Exactly. You don't say ala shchita. Where there is, you say lishchait, and that's how you do it. Where there is a commandment to do it, switch the language. It's up to Gemara. Now, this is interesting. As you all know, the way we do lulav and esrog is we put it together today, and then we turn the esrog over, we pick it up, make the blessing, and then we turn it up because of this idea of all brachas have to be said over las yasam before you do the mitzvah. What's the mitzvah of lulav and esrog? Simply picking up all four, the lulav, the esrog, the hadas, and the arovas. You pick it up, and the moment you pick it up, you're already mekayim the mitzvah. So that's the solution that we came up with today, that we turn the esrog upside down so that you're not mekayim the mitzvah. You didn't yet do the mitzvah because you didn't do it the right way. It has to be the right way with the pitim up. So we turn the esrog upside down, we make the blessing, and then we turn it up. But this Gemara didn't know from that solution. This Tana didn't say. One other thing is, we make the shechiyanu after we take the lulav. Here they made according to this man, they made the shechiyanu when they put the lulav together. When he took the lulav and he tied onto it, the hadasim and the arabis, and put the esrog together on it, That's what he did it. So Zakti Gemara, Meisvei. If somebody made a lulav for himself, he bound together the four species. Who blessed the you Hashem, who has kept us alive, sustained us, and brought us to the season. Not to lotzes, but if he takes it in order to fulfill the mitzvah. He says, Al netilas lulav, regarding the taking of the lulav. But according to Rav Papi, that's referring backwards, and that's no good for the bracha. Says the Gemara, Shani Hasan to be in the da'ag benofak bey, because by here you have no choice. The moment you pick up the lulav and esrog, you're already mekayim the mitzvah. You were already mekayim the mitzvah, right? You were already mekayim the mitzvah. So therefore, you can't make a bracha that I'm going to. You can only say a bracha that essentially says, I did mekayim the mitzvah. On this, Taisus breaks. Well, if you can't make the bracha, because brachas are only said before you do the mitzvah, and when you pick up the lulav and esrog, automatically, the moment you pick them up, you're automatically mekayim the mitzvah, you fulfilled the mitzvah, then in that case, don't make a bracha at all. Right? If brachas only work, oivel asiyasa, right? Then if they only work oivel asiyasa, that means they only do it, you make a bracha before you do the mitzvah. If I did the mitzvah, I've lost out my chance on the bracha. So the Re says on the side, there's another mitzvah coming up. You need to shake the lulav during Hallel. When we say, give thanks to Hashem, because he's good, he's always loving kindness. And by Ana Hashem and Shirna, Hashem, please Hashem's, say, be our salvation and save us. Then we shake the lulav. So that's another mitzvah. That's a mitzvah midivrei site from the time of the Nevi'im and the Kesuvim, from the times of the prophets and the writings. So it's not a biblical command to shake. The biblical command is merely to take the lulav. So that's what this Gemara is talking about. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, in this case, in order to fulfill the mitzvah, we remember the Brisa says, not lulotze, he took it in order to fulfill the mitzvah. It should have said, yoitze boy midbayale. It should have said, once he has fulfilled the mitzvah by taking it, because by picking it up, he automatically fulfilled the mitzvah. Now you make a bracha. So Zakti Gemara, the truth is, you're right. That's what it should have said. But because there's another half to this Brisa, the Mandiyama wanted to be grammatically the same. Mishum de Kabbalah lemisli sefer leishev basukah, because he wanted to teach us the law about the bracha that you make regarding dwelling in the sukkah. Tanareisha nami lotzes. So therefore he used the same language in the Reisha to fulfill the commandment, even though you've already fulfilled the commandment by picking up the lulav. The Tani Sefer, because the Sefer says, one who makes a sukkah for himself says, when you make the sukkah, you make shechiyanu, which we don't do today. When he comes to sit in the sukkah, he says, he said this, since over there he's going to do the mitzvah of sitting in the sukkah. So in the Reisha, at the beginning of the Brisa, they use the same language. And here's where we're going to stop. The Hilchasa al Bir Chametz, regarding the disposal of chametz, and that's the language that we do use to this day, and that's it. So we're going to start over here. Okay. Oh, one last thing. Let's just go just a little further because we got one more. Oh no, so we'll stop right here.